Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. Today is episode 2 in the Aftermath mini-series. Today we'll be dealing with the text between Addie Maloney and Shan'ann, really in the last couple of days of her life in mid-August. And this is sort of a bridging series to the final episode in the Phone Data Review, episode 50, and that promises to be quite a compelling episode in itself. Starting on Tuesday the 1st on Patreon is a 4-part mini-series called Cindy's Blitz, and it really just goes to that 22-minute exclusive interview that she gave on around about August 14th, so with a couple of days ahead of the sentencing hearing on the 19th. I'm also covering the Lindstrom Interview, a 7-part series dealing with sort of 10-minute chunks of the 70-minute exclusive interview they gave on the 13th of August this year. And, you know, some of what is said there is certainly interesting, some of it is a little bit baffling. And so what I've done is I've sort of listened to what they've said, and I'm just sort of analyzing and discussing some of the aspects. In some areas there ought to have been follow-up questions just to clarify certain things, and then there aren't, and so I've kind of hypothetically done that, just posed a couple of hypothetical follow-up questions and try to look at sort of aspects that the interview doesn't actually quite touch upon. So you can look forward to the Lindstrom Interview series every Monday on Patreon. I'll put a link to episode 1 in the description to this particular video. Then just in general, I just want to thank the 14,000 subscribers on this channel. It's good to have you here, and also the 400 plus patrons on Patreon. It's quite a nice community, especially there. In any event, let's get started with today's episode. Bear in mind it's the second of 3 episodes. The third episode will be on the 29th of August, so this Saturday, so look out for that. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. So, having already concluded the Phone Data Review, which I find quite exhausting, especially the 12th, 13th, 14th, that sort of area, I found that really difficult to get through, just because the Phone Data Review blows up at that point. It sort of doubles and triples in size, and obviously the guy who set up the Phone Data Review just felt like there was more information that was relevant, and so the Phone Data Review ballooned around that area. So it is tempting to think that, having exhaustively gone through the Phone Data Review basically from one end to the other, that everything has been covered, that you've sort of covered everything, right? And I'm going to show you how that is an incorrect assessment. One of the biggest mistakes you can make as, I think, a lawyer, in a criminal lawyer, or also as a true crime author, or anyone who is involved in true crime, is to reach a position where you say, okay, I now know what happened. I now know everything. My knowledge is complete. I now understand. It's a very dangerous place, because there's always a little piece of the pizza, or a little fragment, some ingredient somewhere that changes the taste. It changes the entire thing. Maybe not fundamentally, but it can change it in sometimes subtle ways, sometimes significant ways. And we're going to go into that. Often you actually have court cases where certain information, for whatever reason, isn't admissible, and then it sort of comes out later on, and then that casts a shadow of the entire court case. That information that was sort of small little fragments of information that was sort of left out. I'm not saying it changes everything. I'm just saying it can cast a sort of a shadow. It almost like leaves an aftertaste, if that makes sense. It's almost like having a pizza that's a particular flavor and then adding olives. Olives are definitely going to leave a particular different aftertaste in your mouth on the same pizza. And that is kind of what I'm getting at with these texts between Shan'ann and Eddie Maloney. Now, what's interesting is they take place at a really important time. They kick off on the 1st of August and they end on the 13th. So it's basically that critical 2-week period. And what I think the value is of this correspondence is it's just between two people. So you get a strange kind of powerful continuity, which you don't necessarily get when you've got lots of different voices coming in to the phone data review kind of haphazardly. Okay, so we're going to start on the 1st, and the 1st was actually the 1st of August is the first full day that Chris Watts was in North Carolina. He'd arrived on the 31st, but the 1st was the first full day, and that was the day that they went to Myrtle Beach, the first day that the children could be there. And something that's sort of missing from the phone data review is, number one, that Chris Watts very likely tried to poison Shan'ann to bring about a miscarriage the night that he got back from, the night that he arrived in North Carolina, the night that he, his first night in North Carolina. And so the other aspect that's missing is, what was that like for Shan'ann? What was it like to be poisoned? You sort of get a third-hand version of that in the discovery, where her brother says he noticed her up at 2 o'clock in the morning, or just noticed that she wasn't sleeping and she wasn't well. But what about from Shan'ann herself? And so that is exactly where the text with Shan'ann, between Shan'ann and Eddie, kick off. And she literally writes, and this is starting from the first text. Shan'ann writes, "No vomiting this pregnancy, but nauseousness. The last week I've not been able to pee normal, hard to pee, feeling great otherwise. 10 p.m. last night, Chris rubbed my back in for the first time in over a month. When he was done, I sat up and I was lightheaded. Body felt kind of numb, tingly, itching all over and just weird. 11 p.m.-ish, about an hour later, I stood up to pee and vomited mildly. About 30 minutes later, massive instant migraine came out of nowhere. Took Imatrix around 2:30 a.m. Usually gets rid of migraine within 20 minutes. It's still just as bad right now. Maybe 1.5 sleep last night. I think that means 1.5 hours sleep. And I just vomited again at 5:30 a.m. Still lightheaded, shaky, blurry vision, and exhausted." So Shan'ann, it wasn't as though Watts made an attempt on the baby's life and there was no effect. Shan'ann instantly felt really sick and she had a really bad headache. What I want to sort of emphasize is, at this point she said throughout her third pregnancy she hadn't vomited once. She said no vomiting this pregnancy, but she had felt a little nauseous. And now she vomited a couple of times immediately after Chris Watts arrived. And of course the nausea is worse, but there are other symptoms as well. A migraine that just won't go away despite her taking Imatrix, and that's something that she said would get rid of it usually after 20 minutes. Vomiting, lightheadedness, shakiness, blurry vision, and just absolutely exhausted. And Shan'ann seems to know that she's not well. She seems to realize that, that she's feeling really, really bad, but she doesn't really take it further than that. She doesn't go to the doctor, and that's going to come up in a moment. She also doesn't seem to suspect Chris. Who would? But she doesn't seem to wonder, was it something that I ate? Why do I have these symptoms? Where did they come from? Also interesting is what's actually rubbed her back. And so one wonders what that is all about. Like, did he rub her back, and was he trying to appear to be a nice guy, and then he would be surprised what had happened to her the next day? But she says as soon as he was done, she felt lightheaded. As soon as he was done rubbing her back, she felt lightheaded. She said her body felt numb and tingly, itching all over, and just weird. And then an hour later, she said she had like a massive instant migraine that came out of nowhere. And you've kind of also got to ask, if Chris Watts was intentionally poisoning Shan'ann, didn't he have to wonder, well, what was the chance that she would go to a doctor herself, and then wouldn't he be found out? And the answer seems to be that he knew that she wouldn't. How did he know? Because she never had before, or something like that. He seemed just very confident, knowing that she wouldn't go to a doctor, and he was right. So as we go a little bit further through the timeline, she says, went out to eat last night for dinner. Could this be a vaginal infection, migraine, virus, food poisoning, or morning sickness starting at 15 weeks? So that is what she's thinking that it could be. And so obviously when they went to eat out, that is a possible source, well, that's the possible location where Shan'ann was poisoned. And it could either have been in her food, in her drink, or in something like a shake. If she had a shake at dinner, a sort of some kind of Thrive shake. But he could equally have just sprinkled something over her food or something like that. We don't know where they had dinner, but she wonders, could it be vaginal infection, migraine, virus, food poisoning? Food poisoning, I guess, is the closest to what it could be. It's just deliberate food poisoning. And apparently she did call the doctor, because she says in the next text, doctor said it is dehydration and wanted me to go to ER. So she did call the doctor, but she didn't go ultimately to get herself checked out. And then Eddie responds, I was afraid you haven't been drinking lots of water. You really needed it. You should go into the ER, get them fluids back up. It's important for the baby. And then Shan'ann responds, girl, I'm out of network. Eddie, oh. And then Shan'ann goes on to say, I know I threw up this whole week's food. Meaning on this particular day, on the first, she threw up a whole week's food. Next, Shan'ann says, today was the first day at the beach and we took the kids down, but I videoed and then went back. So it sounds like Shan'ann basically just took a quick video at the beach, and then that was it for her. Then she sort of went back, I guess, to the hotel. And then Eddie says, wait, you can't go to the ER? And Shan'ann responds, I've just had lots of water and Gatorade, yes, but real expensive. So I think that is really showing you just how fraught the Watts' financial situation is that even with her life hanging in the balance in a way, and I literally mean, you could say Nico's life was literally hanging in the balance because he'd been targeted for destruction by Chris Watts. So literally with her baby's life hanging in the balance and her own life kind of teetering, Shan'ann feels like I can't really afford to go to the doctor. I can't afford it. I can do it in my state. I can't do it here. And that gives you an idea of just how severe the financial constraints were. That they were really severe. Even in a life and death situation, she wouldn't necessarily go and get herself checked up. Eddie responds, damn, and says, okay, take care of yourself. And then Shan'ann responds, I've never felt as bad as I did last night this morning. And I think we're going to end it off there. We had 15 minutes. And we're going to end it off there for the folks on YouTube.